You did 11 push-ups this morning and called that the set. Your arms had 3 more in them. You knew it while standing back up. There's a recorded exact moment a body decides to stop trying. It isn't the moment of failure. It isn't only push-ups. You closed the tab on a job application halfway through the 3rd question, the one that asks you to describe a weakness, and told yourself you'd finish it later. You didn't finish it later. You hung up the phone 1 ring early on a call you didn't want to make and let it go to voicemail, which meant you never technically avoided anything. You just arrived too late to try. Here is the part that should bother you more than it does. In every one of those moments, the stopping happened first. The reason arrived after, already dressed up as a decision. Researchers started taking that gap seriously in the late 1960s, and the first place they found it wasn't in a person at all. In 1967, at the University of Pennsylvania, Martin Seligman and Stephen Maier ran dogs through a room most of them never asked to be in. One group could press a panel with their nose and end an electric shock. A second group felt the identical shock at the identical moments with no panel that worked. Nothing they did changed anything. A third group felt no shock at all. The next day, every dog went into a different box, split down the middle by a low wall either one of them could clear standing still. The shock came on. The dogs who'd had a working panel jumped the wall in seconds. So did the dogs who'd never been shocked before. Most of the dogs from the middle group, the ones who'd learned that nothing worked, lay down on the electrified floor and took it. The wall was right there. Some of them never even looked at it. Seligman and Maier had their answer, and it was a clean one. You stop trying before you have to because some earlier version of you ran the experiment, learned the panel didn't work, and filed it away. The push-ups, the application, the phone call, all downstream of an old closed case. There is one detail in that write-up worth holding on to. For the theory to work, the giving up has to be learned. Something has to teach it to you, in a specific place, at a specific time. Move the same design into people, and it starts to come apart. Donald Hiroto tried it in 1974, uncontrollable noise instead of shock, and got a version of the same result. But not everyone. Some people who'd sat through noise they couldn't stop tried just as hard afterward as people who'd never heard it. Some people who'd never been near the noise gave up early anyway on the very first task. That variation sat there for 11 years as an inconvenience nobody could explain away. By 1978, Seligman was co-authoring a paper with Lynn Abramson and John Teasdale that did something rarer than a new finding. It walked back the old one. The original account, published under his own name, could not explain why the effect landed on some people and missed others completely. So it went back into the model as attribution, as a personal story about why the failure happened, one that some people tell themselves and some people don't. The clean version of your push-ups, the one where an old shock experiment explains the whole thing, was already retired by the people who ran it. What replaced it was smaller and stranger. It said the story you tell about the failure decides more than the failure does. In 2010, Wouter Kool and Matthew Botvinick's lab put people in front of 2 decks of cards, sorting numbers and letters on a screen. One deck almost always asked for the same kind of sort twice in a row. The other deck kept switching the rules underneath them over and over, forcing a harder kind of attention each time. Nobody told anyone which deck was which. Nobody had failed at anything yet. There was no shock, no noise, no prior bad experience to learn from. People chose the easy deck anyway, over and over, across 6 separate versions of the experiment, and most of them couldn't say why when asked directly afterward. Somewhere below the part of the brain that answers questions, a cost was already being calculated and quietly handed up as a preference before a single card was flipped in anger. That is the 11th push-up, not a memory of failing, a running estimate of what the next unit of effort is going to cost you, priced and paid before you've consciously noticed the bill arrive. The pricing isn't indiscriminate, though. It sharpens around one specific condition, succeeding for a reason you can't quite explain. Stuart Berglas and Edward Jones ran an experiment in 1978 where college students solved a batch of problems and were then told they'd done extremely well. Some of them had actually earned it, working through problems that were hard but solvable. Others had been handed a rigged version, unsolvable problems scored as a success no matter what they did, so the praise landed on them without a cause they could point to. Then everyone was offered a choice before a second, real test. Take a drug that was supposed to sharpen performance or one that was supposed to dull it. Among the men who'd received success, they couldn't explain the dulling drug won. Not despite the coming test, because of it. If the second score came in low, the drug was already sitting there, a reason ready-made, and the story stayed intact. That's the attribution from 1978 doing actual work. It isn't a private thought people have about failure after it happens. It's a decision made in advance about how much effort to risk based on how well the story survives being wrong. Here's the reversal. In 2016, Seligman and Maier, the same researcher who ran the dogs in 1967, published a paper with Seligman that took the original theory apart, using tools that didn't exist in 1967. Decades of work on the brainstem had located the actual switch. A cluster of neurons called the dorsal raphe nucleus, releasing serotonin that suppresses the drive to act. And here is what it showed. That shutdown is not learned. It is the default. It is what a mammal's nervous system does automatically under prolonged, uncertain difficulty, with no teaching required, no earlier trial run, no filed-away lesson from a shock you couldn't escape. It was already installed before Seligman's dogs ever entered the room. What actually gets learned, slowly and only sometimes successfully, is the opposite. A part of the prefrontal cortex has to notice, case by case, that effort is actually working, and then physically reach down and switch the shutdown off. Trying is the acquired skill. Quitting was never the lesson. It is the setting underneath the lesson, and it comes standard, which means the 11th push-up was never a special failure of yours to explain. It's what a functioning nervous system produces by default, every time, in anyone, including whichever version of you priced the 12th push-up and decided, correctly, by its own arithmetic, that it wasn't worth what it would have cost. Tomorrow morning you'll do 11 push-ups again, and somewhere around the 9th, something that was never taught to you will start doing the arithmetic anyway. Learned behavior. Sources in the description.